that house, silence wasn't peace. It was dismissal. The man woke up every morning before anyone else, not because he needed to, because it was easier to move through the house before it became crowded with indifference. He dressed carefully, always the same way. Simple clothes, perfectly fitted, neutral colors, clean shoes. Nothing flashy, nothing careless. He moved through the kitchen without turning on the main lights, preparing his coffee quietly, as if sound itself might inconvenience someone. No one ever asked where he was going. No one ever had. His wife appeared later, already fully assembled. Blonde hair, perfectly styled, not a strand out of place. Lips swollen and glossy. Face smooth in a way that betrayed hours of work done to erase time. She wore expensive clothes even inside the house, as if being seen mattered, even when no one was watching. She barely looked at anyone, him. When she did, it was with the same expression one reserves for furniture that has been there too long. "You're leaving already?" she asked, without interest. "Yes," he replied calmly. She nodded, scrolling on her phone. No follow-up question. Their daughter came down the stairs shortly after. Red hair, carefully styled to resemble her mother's. Same posture, same impatience. She kissed her mother's cheek and ignored him completely. Her boyfriend waited outside most days. Sometimes she sneaked him in when she thought no one noticed. She laughed loudly with him, mocked her father's quiet presence. "He's harmless," she once said, not bothering to lower her voice. The man heard it. He always did. The son rarely left his room. Overweight, lethargic, controller permanently in his hands. He yelled when the internet lagged, complained when food wasn't delivered fast enough. Money appeared for him whenever he asked. He never questioned its origin. He never thanked anyone. And the man paid for everything. The house, the cars, the utilities, the lifestyle. He never mentioned it. That was his mistake, or perhaps his strategy. The house had a cleaner, a red-haired man, younger, quiet. He moved through the space with exaggerated politeness, eyes lowered. The wife noticed him. She noticed everyone who noticed her. Their conversations were brief at first, harmless, then familiar, then unnecessary. The man never confronted her, not because he didn't know, but because confrontation requires belief that the other person still sees you as relevant. He had already understood his position. At dinner, they sat together out of habit, not connection. The wife criticized the food. Daughter complained about restrictions she didn't have. The son ate without looking up. No one asked him about his day. No one asked him anything. He listened. That was his role. Sometimes, late at night, he sat alone in his office. No decorations, no photos, just shelves of documents and a single lamp. He reviewed papers no one knew existed. Trust structures, transfers, foundations. He closed folders carefully, labeling them with neutral words, not names, never names. When he spoke, his voice was calm, measured. He never raised it. People mistook that for weakness. They always do. The wife mocked him openly now. "You live like you're broke," she said once, laughing with her daughter. The daughter laughed too. The son didn't even look up. He smiled faintly, not because it amused him, because the misunderstanding was, he had learned long ago that money reveals nothing by itself. It only amplifies what is already there. Discipline becomes power. Carelessness becomes destruction, and addiction becomes entitlement. One evening, the wife didn't come to bed. The man knew where she was. He didn't check. He didn't need proof anymore. He had something else to finish. The heart attack came quietly. No warning, no drama. He collapsed in his office, surrounded by things no one else understood. When they found him, the room looked ordinary. No vaults, No safes. Just a man who appeared smaller in death than he ever had in life. The wife cried loudly, too loudly. The daughter posted condolences online. The son asked what would happen next. None of them asked why. At the funeral, people spoke of him as if he had been simple, modest, unremarkable. They praised his humility. The wife nodded solemnly. Inside, she felt relief. This was finally over. She imagined what would come next. Comfort without compromise. Money without patience. The house would be hers. The control, too. At the lawyer's office, she sat confidently. The daughter crossed her legs impatiently. The son whispered about upgrades he wanted. The lawyer cleared his throat. He began to read. The first pages were ordinary. Then came the pause, a deliberate one. The lawyer adjusted his glasses. There is one clause, he said, that requires clarification. The wife smiled. Yes? The lawyer looked up. Your husband has donated the entirety of his estate. Silence. To whom, she asked. To an international institution dedicated to fighting addiction. Froze. The daughter laughed. The son frowned. That's not funny, the wife said sharply. The lawyer didn't smile. There is nothing left to inherit. Her breath caught. What about the house? Transferred. The accounts? Closed. The businesses? Never existed under his name. The wife stood abruptly. This is impossible. The lawyer's voice remained calm. He was very precise. For the first time in years, the man's presence filled the room. Not physically, structurally. Everything made sense. The silence after the lawyer finished speaking lasted longer than anyone expected. Not because no one had something to say, but because nothing they said could reverse what had already been done. The wife was the first to move. She didn't sit back down. She didn't scream. She laughed. A short, sharp sound that cut the room in half. This is a joke, she said. He wouldn't do this. The lawyer didn't respond. He simply gathered the documents and slid them neatly back into the folder, as if the conversation had already ended. That will be all, he said. That was when the daughter's face changed. Not disbelief, fear. They left the office without another word. Outside, the city moved as usual. People walked. Cars passed. Coffee cups steamed in hands that had nothing to do with their collapse. The wife stood on the sidewalk, staring at her phone. No notifications, no emergency transfers, no apologies from the universe. Just silence. The first call came an hour later, from the bank. Polite, professional. There appears to be some confusion regarding your account status. The confusion lasted exactly 30 seconds. After that, the truth settled in. When they reached the house, the gates didn't. The wife pressed the remote again. Nothing. The daughter tried. Nothing. The son leaned out of the car window, already irritated. Did you pay the bill? He asked. The wife stepped out. A security guard she didn't recognize approached. His posture was respectful. His authority was absolute. You no longer have access to this property. The word property felt intentional, not home. She laughed again, louder this time. This is my house. The guard nodded. It was, he replied. Behind him, movers carried boxes through the front door. Furniture she had chosen. Art she had displayed. Clothes she had never worn twice. All of it reduced to inventory. The daughter screamed. The son threatened. The wife stood frozen. For the first time, no one responded to her presence. No one deferred. No one cared. They were allowed 15 minutes to collect personal items. Not out of kindness, out of protocol. The house felt smaller already, stripped of meaning. The wife grabbed jewelry first, instinctively. The daughter packed clothes. The son looked for his console. None of them looked at the walls, or the office, or the place where the man had actually lived. They left with what they could carry. The gate closed behind them, this time permanently. The drive to the smaller house was quiet. No arguments, no accusations. Just the sound of tires on asphalt and the low hum of something breaking internally. The daughter checked her phone obsessively. No messages. The son stared at the window. The wife stared straight ahead. She was calculating. The house in Boca Raton smelled like dust and memory. Old furniture, old air. A place untouched by relevance. "This is disgusting," the daughter said. The son laughed nervously. "This is temporary, right?" The wife didn't answer. She was too busy realizing something she had avoided for years. Nothing in this house was paid for by illusion. That night, the power flickered. The internet lagged. The son slammed his door. The daughter cried loudly on the phone. The wife sat at the kitchen table, staring at nothing. For the first time, she wondered what the man had actually done every day. The next morning, the cleaner didn't arrive. Of course he didn't. The irony didn't escape her. Calls went unanswered. Friends became busy. Invitations disappeared. Status, she realized, was not something you owned. It was something others lent you, and they had reclaimed it. The daughter tried to meet her boyfriend. He didn't show. The son tried to log into his gaming account. The subscription had expired. The wife tried to access an account she had never needed to question. Access denied. Anger finally arrived. Not loud, focused. She tore through old files, drawers, boxes she had never opened. Documents she had ignored because they weren't beautiful. Legal language she had dismissed as boring. And slowly, a pattern emerged. Her husband's name was missing. Not absent. Redirected. She found letters addressed to institutions she had never heard of. Foundations, trusts, organizations with names that meant nothing to her before. But one phrase repeated itself. Prevention and recovery. The daughter lashed out. "This is your fault," she screamed. "You pushed him." The son joined in. "You always acted like he was useless." The wife listened. For once, she didn't interrupt, because for the first time, she was afraid they were right. She remembered moments she had dismissed. The man leaving early. The man returning late. The man who never drank, never gambled, never indulged. While the son drowned in games, the daughter drowned in attention, and she drowned in mirrors. That night, she didn't sleep. She sat at the table, surrounded by papers, and for the first time, she saw the man clearly, not as a husband, as a safeguard. The next morning, a letter arrived. No return address, just a seal. Inside was a single sentence, written in his hand. "Some people don't need more money. They need less access." Her hands shook. Rage. With recognition. The house felt colder, smaller, less forgiving. She looked at her children, at what they had become, at what she had allowed. And for the first time, a terrifying thought surfaced. He hadn't punished them. He had protected the world from them. The search didn't begin with curiosity. It began with necessity. The wife understood that if she didn't uncover the structure her husband had built, whatever remained of her life would collapse without explanation. She needed answers, not for closure, for survival. She started where she had always avoided: paperwork. Not contracts she had signed, but documents she had ignored. Boxes stored in the back of the house. Folders she had once called irrelevant. Letters she had never opened because they didn't demand attention. Now, they were all that mattered. The first realization came quietly. Her husband's name appeared far less often than she expected. He wasn't absent. He was distributed. Trusts layered inside foundations. Foundations linked to international organizations. Organizations connected to prevention programs. Addiction, that word, appeared again and again. Not as charity, as infrastructure. She remembered the man's habits differently now. He never drank, never gambled, never indulged publicly. At the time, she had called him boring. Now she wondered if it had been discipline born from proximity. The daughter lost interest quickly. This wasn't dramatic enough for her. She needed confrontation, a villain, a mistake to point at. She spent more time outside now, chasing distractions that still responded to her presence. The son, on the other hand, grew restless. Without constant stimulation, he became agitated. His gaming sessions stretched longer. His frustration grew sharper. The irony was not lost on the wife. She didn't comment. The deeper she dug, the more she realized how little she had known the man she lived with. There were years missing from his public biography. Entire decades summarized in a sentence. Early career. No details, no photos, no witnesses. She followed those gaps. Old business registrations led her overseas. Entities dissolved quietly. Records sealed, but not erased. Nothing ever is. She found mentions in international reports. Nothing explicit, just patterns. Movement of funds through regions known for collapse. Names appearing briefly before disappearing. Routes. Always routes. She spoke to people who had once worked near him. Former drivers, assistants, accountants, people who had never been invited into his personal life. They remembered him differently. Focused, controlled, distant but fair, and always careful about who he let close. One man said something that stayed with her. He never touched the money himself, the man recalled, but he always knew where it was. She didn't ask what he meant. She already understood. The word addiction returned again and again. In the institutions he funded, in the language he used, risk mitigation, behavioral prevention, controlled exposure. These weren't charities born of guilt. They were systems built from experience. She realized then that the donation wasn't symbolic. It was strategic. He wasn't giving money away. He was removing it from circulation, neutralizing it. At night, she watched her son play. Hours passed without interruption. No awareness of time, no control. She saw him not as a child anymore, but as evidence. The daughter came home late one evening, perfume too strong, laughter too loud. She looked at her mother and scoffed. Still playing detective? Didn't respond. She was reading something far more unsettling. A transcript from years ago. A testimony buried under unrelated proceedings. The speaker's name was redacted, but the behavior described was familiar. Careful, patient, untraceable. Her hands trembled, not because she was afraid of the truth, but because the truth fit too well. She sat back and allowed the realization to settle. Her husband hadn't feared exposure. He had feared contagion. Money that came from chaos carried chaos forward. He had built a life dedicated to interruption, stopping cycles, breaking lines, including his own. She remembered arguments she had dismissed, moments when he questioned indulgence, when he warned about excess, when he refused to fund things without explanation. She had mocked him for it. Now she saw it for what it was: containment. The final piece arrived in the form of a legal brief, an explanation of how the donation had been structured. Irreversible. No appeals. No discretionary clauses. Once activated, the funds could not return to private hands, ever. She laughed softly, a sound closer to defeat than humor. Her husband hadn't trusted his family with power, and now she understood why. Not because they were evil, because they were unprepared. She closed the folder and looked around the small house. The daughter was gone again. The son was yelling at a screen. Nothing had changed, except her. For the first time, she didn't feel robbed. She felt exposed. Exposed as someone who had lived beside discipline, and never learned it. She found one final letter, addressed to no one, just a thought, written in careful handwriting. Money amplifies behavior. It does not correct it. She folded the letter slowly, and in that moment, something shifted. Not acceptance, resolve. She wouldn't get the money back, but she would understand the man, completely, even if it destroyed what remained of her illusions. The first rumor didn't come from enemies. It came from silence, from invitations that stopped arriving, from calls that went unanswered, from doors that once opened automatically and now remained closed. The wife felt it immediately, not as loss, as exclusion. She tried to re-enter circles that had once felt permanent, charity events, private dinners, places where presence alone used to guarantee relevance. She wasn't rejected openly. That would have been easier. She was ignored. Smiles that didn't reach eyes, conversations that shifted when she approached, seats that were suddenly taken. Status, she learned too late, is fragile when it isn't earned. The daughter felt it online first. Comments changed tone. Followers disappeared. Whispers replaced admiration. Someone posted a screenshot of a headline she hadn't seen yet. Addiction prevention. She laughed it off publicly. Privately, she panicked, because narratives were forming without her consent. The son felt it in his body. Long hours without stimulation made him restless, angry. He demanded money with an urgency that had never existed before. The answer was always the same. There was none. His outbursts became louder, more desperate, and more visible. The wife tried to control the story. She reached out to journalists, not aggressively, strategically. She framed the donation as eccentricity, as guilt, as manipulation by outsiders. No one bit, because the truth didn't need help. It was cleaner than her version. Former colleagues of her husband began to speak. Not publicly, casually. They shared stories she had never heard. How careful he had been, how precise, disciplined. How he had quietly funded programs long before anyone knew his name. The narrative shifted. He wasn't naive. He was intentional. Here H, the daughter confronted her mother one night. "You let him humiliate us," she shouted. The wife didn't respond. She was watching her daughter with a clarity she had never allowed herself before. All performance, no substance. She wondered when that had happened, and whether it had been taught or inherited. HR, the son crossed a line days later. He demanded money from a former associate of his father, loudly, entitled. The associate recorded the interaction. It spread. Not viral, worse, permanent. HR, the house in Boca Raton became a pressure cooker. Every day felt smaller. Walls closed in. The wife stopped pretending this was temporary. She stopped promising her children restitution, because she finally understood something fundamental. There would be no reversal. She visited one of the institutions quietly, unannounced. No cameras, no press. Children sat in small rooms, focused, structured, disciplined, not deprived, protected. She watched a boy refuse a drink offered to him. Another put down a phone voluntarily. Rules were followed without force. She felt something twist inside her. Not jealousy, recognition. That night, she returned home and confronted her children. Not with anger, with honesty. "This is why," she said. They didn't listen. They couldn't. Understanding requires loss. They were still losing. The daughter left shortly after, chasing relevance elsewhere. The son spiraled, louder, messier, more obvious. The wife stood between them and the truth, no longer shielding, no longer explaining. She was tired. The final confirmation arrived by mail. Stamped, signed, unchangeable. The donation was complete. All funds transferred. All assets neutralized. The empire no longer existed in any private form. She sat alone at the table. The same table where she had once dismissed her husband's quiet habits. She imagined him sitting there, not triumphant, relieved. The world adjusted quickly. It always does. New stories replaced theirs. Attention moved on. Only consequences remained. She realized then what the punishment truly was. Not poverty, not shame, clarity. The daughter called weeks later, not to apologize, to complain. The son didn't call at all. The wife listened to the silence after hanging up. It felt final. Carefully, the next morning. Not extravagantly, intentionally. She knew where she needed to go. Not to fight. To understand the last thing her husband had left behind. Not money. Meaning. The lawyer didn't invite them. He didn't need to. The meeting was already scheduled long before the man died. That was the detail the wife understood only now. Nothing about this ending was improvised. The room was smaller than she expected. No grand table, no dramatic setting, just a neutral office with soft lighting and a single envelope placed carefully at the center. Her children sat across from her. The daughter looked distracted, phone face down for the first time in weeks. The son slouched in his chair, eyes tired, body restless. They had nothing left to demand, only something left to hear. The lawyer spoke calmly. Your husband requested that this recording be played only after all transfers were complete. The wife nodded. She was past anger now, past bargaining. She wanted truth, even if it hurt. The screen turned on. Her husband appeared older than she remembered. Not weak, honest. No suit, no office, just a simple chair and a neutral background. For the first time in years, he looked directly into the camera. If you're watching this, he said, then I did what I believed was necessary. He paused. Not for drama, for weight. I know how this looks. I know how it feels. The wife leaned forward slightly. Her breath slowed. I didn't leave money to my family because money has never corrected behavior. The daughter frowned. The son shifted uncomfortably. I've seen what money does when it amplifies addiction, the man continued. Addiction to attention, to pleasure, to escape. The wife's chest tightened. He spoke of his past. Not in detail, not with pride. I was surrounded by it early. People who believed access was the same as control. He shook his head slightly. It never is. He explained the donation, not as generosity, as removal. Some resources are too dangerous to remain concentrated, he said. They don't belong to individuals. They belong to systems that neutralize harm. The daughter scoffed quietly. The son didn't. He stared at the screen. I didn't punish my family, the man said. I protected them from something they were never prepared to carry. The wife's eyes filled, not with tears, with understanding. He addressed her directly then. I loved you, he said, but love doesn't erase patterns. She closed her eyes. I watched you mistake appearance for strength, he continued, and I realized that giving you control would not save you. The silence was absolute. The final sentence was simple. Money ends where discipline begins. The screen went black. No one spoke. There was nothing left to argue, no villain to confront, no mistake to correct. The lawyer stood. That concludes everything, he said. The daughter stormed out first, hesitated. Then followed. The wife remained seated, alone. She didn't cry, not because she was strong, because crying would imply injustice, and there was none left to claim. Weeks passed. The daughter disappeared into new circles, always chasing relevance. The son struggled, without money, without structure, without discipline. The irony was cruel. and perfect. The institutions flourished quietly. No press releases, no recognition, just work. Children redirected, cycles interrupted, lives stabilized before collapse could define them. One evening, the wife visited one of the centers again. This time she stayed longer. She watched a boy put down a phone without being asked. She watched another choose water over something stronger. No applause, no reward, just habit. Then, this was the inheritance. Not money, structure. She returned home that night and stood in front of the mirror. No makeup, no performance. Just a woman facing the consequences of being seen too late. Her husband had not been invisible. He had been watching, measuring, deciding. The world remembered him briefly as a man who donated everything, then moved on. That was exactly what he wanted. The wife folded the last letter she had kept hidden for months. The one line she could no longer escape. We don't give people what they want. We give them what they can survive. Outside, the night was quiet. No drama, no audience. Just the end of something that had never truly belonged to them. He didn't die poor. He died careful.